Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Uche. When I was about 9 years old, I met my mother for the very first time. Today, I currently live in Texas, USA. However, I was conceived and born in a city called Aba in the southeastern part of Nigeria. And after I was born, when I was approximately between 4 to 5 months old, my mother got on a plane and moved to America to go live with my father. When she moved to America to go live with my dad, they had my sisters, about four of them, while I grew up in Nigeria with my grandparents, my mother's parents. And I remember life was relatively comfortable for me back in Nigeria. Shout out to my grandparents, especially my grandma, who was my rock. She accepted me for who I am. I never had any sense of insecurity growing up back in Nigeria with my grandparents. But I always wondered, there was always this lingering thought of where are my parents, my real parents, you know? So I constantly had questions about where's my mom, where's my dad, you know, even though back then we would talk on the phone here and there, but it was not like today, you know, where we have FaceTime, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and things like that. So it was, you know, back in the days, we'd have to schedule phone calls to talk to them. And I'll also kind of talk to my sisters back in the day. But I always had this lingering thought of how about me? How come I'm not in America with them? How come I wasn't born in America with them? How come I can't go live with them in America? And how come they're not coming to visit me? And of course, as a kid, it was basically impossible for me to understand the immigration process, you know, what it takes to migrate to America and also what it takes to travel from America to Nigeria. But my grandparents and my uncles, they did a good job trying to communicate with me in a language that was age appropriate, that, you know, my parents do love me. It's just that they are taking care of certain things back in America, and eventually, inevitably, they'll come back to Nigeria and take me to America with them as well. So for the most part, I had a relatively okay childhood until I was 9 years old and I met my mother for the first time. This was when she came back to Nigeria for the first time after she left me behind approximately 4 to 5 months after I was born. And long story short, that was a very horrible meeting. I remember her being very angry at me, and I couldn't understand why, because as a kid at 9 years old, this was my first time meeting my mother, and this was also my first time meeting two of my sisters at the time. Naturally, I was very excited. You know, I was looking forward to this trip so bad, but I was so disappointed, and it's taken me so many years of therapy to be able to understand that the anger that she had wasn't necessarily directed towards me. It's just a whole lot of things that she's dealing with that she has not overcome yet, and it looked like it was a personal attack on me. So that, coupled with the fact that having lived in Nigeria by myself without my parents, you know, always feeling like, okay, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe perhaps I wasn't good enough to be born in America. Maybe I wasn't good enough to move to America to go live with my parents and my sisters as well. So having her show this unexplainable anger towards me at 9 years old solidified my fears of, yes, there's something wrong with you and you're not one of us. And I remember one of the things that she told me back then is how I was a cause of her miserable life. And I remember that day so vividly. She was very angry, loud, on top of her voice, and she said that she was stuck in a horrible marriage with my father and she was looking for ways to get rid of him and move back home. But unfortunately, she found that she was pregnant with me. And I remember her saying so vividly that she had even considered taking me out, you know, aborting me, so to speak. However, because of her faith, she did not abort the kid. So now she is unfortunately stuck in a marriage that is loveless. And as a result, her life is full of misery. I remember this encounter like it was yesterday, and it left a horrible impression about myself in my head. Growing up past that, I felt unwanted. I felt like there's something inherently wrong with me. Even my own mother didn't want me, hence why I wasn't born in America, hence why I couldn't live with my sisters, hence why I couldn't go to America. I felt like there was this cloud of sadness that always hovered over me. There was this dark cloud hovering over me, and I just couldn't overcome it. And eventually, when I was about 15 years old, I moved to America. And even moving to America, as I got older, I always still felt that dark cloud. And of course, navigating through my reality in America as a Black person, as an African immigrant, and also as a queer person coming of age, tapping into my sexuality and exploring the nuances of what it all entails, there was always this dark energy hovering over me that I just couldn't overcome, and everything so compounded on me. It felt so heavy, and I didn't really know how to articulate this to anyone. I didn't really know who to turn to. You know, I had the societal issues, the societal pressures, I had family pressures, I had my own personal issues that I was trying to navigate through, and it was just so mad and so heavy on me. And the older I got, the more I tried to fight these feelings, these thoughts of inadequacy, the stronger they were and the more invasive they were. And it wasn't until 2013, I believe summer of 2013, that I surrendered. I completely dropped everything. I had a fight with my mother after so many years of trying so hard to prove to her that I am that kid that is worthy of being loved. I realized that the problem wasn't me. The problem was her. Until she rectified what it is that is broken within her, she would never be able to love anyone else outside of her. Now, this is my own perspective, my own experience. It dawned on me in 2013 that I was alone and I had to fend for myself. So I dropped everything. And I hit rock bottom. I hit extreme depression, extreme anxiety. Here I was at 21 years old in America, still depressed, still a loser. And unfortunately, I even contemplated suicide. I remember thinking to myself to book a one-way ticket from Los Angeles to Nigeria and find some remote village somewhere where no one knew anything about me and get a gun or hire some people to murder me and have my body just rot in the bushes, and so no one will find my body and I'll just be gone from this world. I hit rock bottom, and I was even homeless at some point because I lost my job. I didn't have any income coming in. When I tell you I hit rock bottom, I hit rock bottom. And because I hit rock bottom, I started doing what Uche would normally do. I caved into myself. And at that point in my life, I walked away from God, or at least I thought I walked away from God. And like I said, I did what Uche would normally do, cave into myself. And it was within caving into myself that I found God. I don't really know how to articulate it properly, but the best way that I try to describe this to people is when I caved into myself, it was more silence. I stopped trying to find myself without. I stopped caring about what people thought because I listened to everyone all of my life, and in listening to everyone, I was always the loser. So there was no point for me to pay attention to what anyone else thought anyway. So I started doing my own thing. And by doing my own thing, I was challenging myself to embrace things that were more natural to me. I was just doing me. And the best way that I can describe this time in my life is it felt as though I was walking through a neighborhood that I knew for sure I had never been through before, but somehow it felt so familiar. And obviously and understandably so, I didn't understand this. I was fairly new into listening to myself. I enlisted in the US military in October 2013. And even when I was in the military, I don't know how to explain it again. However, it felt right. It felt right. For the very first time in my life, I felt like I was aligned with something that I couldn't really put my mind to. But the point was that I was doing me. For the very first time, I was doing me, and I just didn't care who was watching. I didn't care who cared. I was just doing me. I went back to school. I also dropped out from college because I felt like, I was a loser. So there was no point for me to pursue education. But because I was back in the military, I went back to college. I didn't even know anything about the military services at all. I didn't even know anything about the military uniforms. And I'm not even making this up. I didn't even know you got paid in the military. I didn't know there was any type of educational benefits. I had no idea anything that has to do with military. I literally joined the military because I had given up on life. And it was either join the military or sell drugs or sell my body on the streets. So I figured, you know what? Since I'm doing me, the most natural thing that comes to me right now is to enlist in the military. It felt right. Again, I don't know how to explain this, yet it felt right. I met some wonderful people just by being me. And again, the more I walked through that neighborhood, the more it felt so familiar. And that's when I found God. Growing up in Nigeria, I'm sure everyone watching this for the most part, if you're Nigerian or if you are from a family or country or culture that is heavily religious, we have this idea of what God is. We were taught for the most part, when most people think about the image of God, we think of God as a he, a man, a white man, older white man, a father figure, someone who sits somewhere in the high clouds, a throne. And the image of God from my culture has been so corrupted to come off as some narcissistic man who is also homophobic, who is also transphobic, who is colorist, who is racist, an image that portrays anything but love. So I started having some form of dilemma within me. I loved myself. Again, walking through this neighborhood, after in 2013, I hit rock bottom, I decided to do my own thing. Walking through this neighborhood, it felt good. It felt familiar. It felt right. It felt right from a deeply genuine place, a place where time doesn't exist. And I felt right. For the very first time in my life, I felt that I was aligned with something other than myself, if that makes sense. But then according to these images that I was taught in Nigeria, I wasn't right. I was an abomination. I was not good enough. The idea of God being a white man and how a lot of white supremacy has been perpetuated in the image of God, as a black man, it felt like I was not good. As a queer man, it felt like I was not good. So it drove me to start questioning things. Perhaps could it be that we are not worshiping God? We are possibly worshiping something else. And then I started, exploring what is. If you've ever lived in Nigeria or in Africa, you probably know that Africans and Nigerians specifically are very religious. I have an episode where I talked about how we Africans, we don't know God. I'm going to try to attach the link down below for everyone who's interested. And I think I did a good job breaking it down. I started to notice that considering how very religious Africans are, and specifically Nigerians are, in Africa, for example, we have approximately 50% Muslims and approximately 50% Christians. Same thing in Nigeria, we have approximately 50% Muslims and approximately 50% Christians. Considering how very religious Nigerians are, whether it's the Muslims or the Christians who make so much noise about God and Allah, yet the average Nigerian and also the average African knows no peace, considering all the malarkey that our continent and also the country of Nigeria has been bombarded with and constantly facing, from insecurity, lack of opportunities, lack of infrastructure, poor health care, and so on and so forth. I mean, we all know about this. And if you're not familiar, please go on Google, do your own research, and you'll be able to see exactly what's happening on the motherland. My point is, considering how extremely religious Nigeria and Africa is, home and abroad, considering how much we made so much noise about God. I remember when I was a kid in Nigeria, we went to so many churches, there were so many crusades, so many church events. It was almost an abomination. Actually, it was an abomination for you to say you don't believe in God or you don't go to church. And I was able to observe how quite hypocritical a lot of people are, how people were so quick to be up in arm in the name of God, yet a lot of their lifestyles didn't necessarily reflect God. And also the average family dynamic in Nigeria is so broken. So it got me thinking, perhaps could it be that we don't know what God is? Because again, all that God, and it's still not reflected in our daily lives. The perfect analogy that I like to use is here in America, for example. If you've ever been to America or you know anything about America, you probably do realize that there's a lot of fast food restaurants in America. Basically, every corner of the street has some food vendor outlet, some type of stuff, either gas stations, fast foods, grocery stores. There's always food available, literally. Matter of fact, you can even order food and it will be delivered to you. My point is, there's so much surplus of food here in America, and that in its own way is reflected in the way the people look. I think there's a research that says that about 60% of Americans are overweight. So when I walk into a room and see a lot of people in America are overweight, about 60% of people in America are overweight, common sense would tell me, okay, there's got to be something in the diet. And then, of course, considering what I know about the surplus of food in America, it makes sense for that much food in the American culture to be reflected in the people's health, obesity, diabetes, and so on and so forth. I know it's probably a very horrible analogy, but this is also true. Americans are known to be very overweight, and this is because of the surplus of food. Again, there's so much abundance of food and is reflected in the way the people live. But then going back to Nigeria, there's so much abundance and surplus of religion and God and churches and mosques, yet there's no reflection of that in the people's personal life. That got me thinking, yes, for sure, we do not know God. So I took it upon myself to start researching on what God is, what truly is of God, and not the malarkey that we've been indoctrinated to believe that is God, the narcissistic God that is anything but love. So I decided to trust my own intelligence to deduce what this God is and what this God is not. I'm going to give a disclaimer. I know that I'm not the smartest person in the room. I know that my IQ is probably not the highest. I have no Ivy League education. I have no Ivy League degree. I am just a guy with common sense. So you guys are probably smarter than me. I'm not a theologian either. However, I do have a great deal of common sense, and I try to use my common sense to deduce what this God possibly is and what this God possibly is not. This is my deduction. God is good. But not just good. God is the epitome of goodness. To be an epitome of something means that you are the highest level of something. So not only is God good, God is the epitome of goodness, as in nothing can ever be more good than God. It is impossible for anything, anywhere, and anyone to be more good than God. God is also the creator. So if a good God who is a creator and also the epitome of goodness is our creator, it makes sense for us, the creations, to also be good, because it would be impossible for a good creator, the epitome of goodness that is, to create anything less than good. So therefore, by default, we are good. So which means that you, the creature created by a good God, you are good by default, but not just good, you are perfect the way you were made. Because again, think about it. God, who is good, but not just good, the epitome of goodness, and also our creator created us. It will be impossible for us to be less than perfect. So it got me thinking, then what is the problem? What is the problem if God is so good and also the epitome of goodness and also our creator and we are good and perfect creatures? What is the problem? How come all the things that I've been indoctrinated into tells me the complete opposite? It dawned on me that the problem is that we human beings, we have recreated God in our own image, and that is the problem. See, God is infinite, and even me, myself, as a finite human being, it would be impossible for me to fully comprehend God because one, I am a human being and by default, I am finite. Infinity is a concept that is impossible for a human being to fully understand. I can even begin to start scratching the surface as to what infinity entails, but I do understand, at least I am humble enough to know that God is infinite. Now, let me talk about infinity for a bit. Like I mentioned earlier, human beings lack the ability to comprehend what infinity entails. And this is because of how we understand time. A lot of physicists will tell you that time in its own very nature is an illusion. And our perception of time is what helps us understand this reality, this realm of human being. But in reality, time is an illusion. But in order for this illusion to be created in our head, two things need to be present: movement and observation. This is how they've been able to map out how long the universe has existed, from the very first explosion of light to the Big Bang Theory, and our observation with the equipment that we have today that we're able to see how far those lights have traveled. The movement, the Big Bang, and our observation with the special equipments we have, this is how we've been able to create time. And as a result, human beings, we comprehend time in a linear fashion. But the reality is that time in its own very nature is an illusion. What actually is existence. Existence in its own very nature is infinite. And in quantum physics, a lot of quantum physicists would definitely agree that time in its own very nature is an illusion. It does not exist. The only thing that does exist is existence itself, not even space, because even space is a construct that we created in our heads. This is a human construct that we've created. What exists is existence itself, and we don't really understand this existence. Again, remember, existence in its own very nature is infinite, and it's impossible for us finite human beings to fully comprehend the idea of existence. But we are humble enough to understand and acknowledge that there is something out there that is infinite in its own very nature, and that thing is existence. And the interesting thing about existence is, for example, starting with space, a lot of quantum physicists do believe that snapshots in time exists infinitely, which means that everything that has ever happened, that is happening right now, and will ever happen is all happening all at once. We're not able to time travel, hence why we're not able to go back to the time of the dinosaurs, or go back to the Big Bang Theory, or go back before the Big Bang Theory even happened, or figure out what's going to happen in a million years from today, because we don't currently have that ability to be able to travel between space and time. But quantum physicists do believe that every single snapshot in our understanding of time is all happening all at once. Again, your birth is happening right now, your death is happening right now, and you are happening right now. This is because now is all there is. Now is all there has ever been. Now is all there will ever be. Now is all there is. Think about it. Even now can't even be quantified. You can't even think about now as a second. You can't even think of it as a millisecond, because with each passing moment of now is always moving. Even last week when you were doing whatever it is that you were doing it now. Not now as we perceive, but now. It was now back then. And even next week when you will be doing whatever it is that you will be doing it in the now, not in the next week. It's always now. It will always be now. Now is all there is. And this is why time in its own very nature is an illusion, a construct that we human beings have created to understand this illusion of reality. Now that I've explained that time in its own very nature is an illusion, let's talk about infinity, existence in its own infinite nature. A lot of Eastern religions and spiritual leaders will tell you that existence in its infinite nature is actually a circle. So which means it has no beginning, it has no end. It's constantly in motion. I personally like to look at infinite existence as a point, as a dot, a tiny dot. It's circular in nature, but the point is that everything is happening all at once. It has no beginning, it has no end. Everything, literally every single thing is happening all at once. This is what I call the dot of everything. Everything. Think about it, as long as it's possible. This dot of everything includes things you think you know, things you know you don't know, and things you don't know that you don't know. It is infinite in its own very nature. Everything is happening simultaneously in this dot of everything. And the interesting thing about this dot of everything is that it all affects everything. It doesn't matter what's happening in this dot of everything. No matter what happens, even if it's a very tiny microscopic reaction, everything is rearranged as a result of it. Everything. This dot of everything is alive. It's precisely created. It has its own consciousness in its own very nature. And this dot of everything is good. It has been carefully and meticulously crafted to follow a pattern that we understand only as mathematics. This pattern is precise, pristine, and is impossible to change, no matter what. This pattern is not just good, it is the epitome of goodness. So everything that happens within this dot of everything is divinely ordered and precise. So literally nothing can, has, or will ever exist within this dot of everything without the approval of the good consciousness in its own very nature. So you as a human being, you too are encased within that dot of everything. Now, if you've been following me so far, you probably by now have figured out that this dot of everything is God in its own very nature, because God is not a being. God is being itself. God is existence itself. God is not a being. God is not a man. God is not a white man. God is not homophobic. God is not narcissistic. God is not sexist. God is not colorist. God is not racist. None of that. God is the epitome of goodness that is encased in the consciousness within the dot of everything. Now, you as a human being, you are also within this dot of everything. And like I mentioned earlier, you too are good. It will be impossible for you to not be good. You will not even exist. You will not be part of that existence itself. So you are good by default. But not just you, everything is good by default. Literally everything. Everything exudes this consciousness. Literally everything. And I mean everything. This included, my computer included, this mic included, that included, the air molecules you breathe in and the ones you breathe out, plants, animals, the universe itself is alive. The universe and beyond the universe is encased in this dot of everything. Again, things you think you know, things you know you don't know, and things you don't know that you don't know. Everything is encased in this dot of everything. See, but the only difference though is humans. Humans have been gifted and cursed at the same time too. But this depends on how you want to look at it. We have the ability to choose. We are creators, and this is what it means to create man in our own image. We have the ability to choose to align with that consciousness that courses through the dot of everything or go against it. When we align with that pattern that flows through the consciousness of the dot of everything, we are in accordance with the dot of everything. We are good. We are one with God. However, when we choose to go against, deviate from that pattern that courses through the dot of everything, this consciousness, we sin. And the wages of sin is death, but not death in physicality, but death in spirit. So because we have the ability to choose and we have the ability to create, we create as we please. The best way to describe this is what happened in the Garden of Eden. Of course, this is not literal. I've kind of mentioned this on other episodes, and I'm going to be breaking down exactly what happened in the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden is not a literal place, and Adam and Eve are not literal people. It's a representation. Again, I'm going to be talking about this in other episodes in my YouTube channel. Please make sure to subscribe, by the way. The Garden of Eden is a representation of the goodness that flows from the dot of everything into the human realm, the human manifestation. When we choose to remain in alignment with God, as God has perfectly created us and manifested us into this realm, we are one with God, just like Adam and Eve were in communion with God. However, there's also that which we ought not to do. And this is a representation of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. There's nothing necessarily wrong with the tree. I mean, God created that tree for a reason. It could have been a tree to offer shelter to animals, or some other animal could have liberty to eat the fruits and whatnot. But the tree represents that which we ought not to do. And you know within your heart, within your soul, within your spirit, what you ought not to do, because that pattern, that good pattern, courses through you. And when you are in alignment with that perfect goodness of your manifestation, you are one with God. But when you go against it, you sin. But the problem is the ego. There are so many ways that I can try to describe the ego. The Bible describes the ego with so many names: Satan, devil, Lucifer, son of the morning star, serpent, the father of lies. Those last two are my favorite, the serpent and the king of lies. This is a representation of the serpent that came to tempt Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Now, the devil is not a literal snake. This is more so a description of its nature. I prefer to call it the ego. But the point is that this ego is a foreign entity that exists in this realm. It only exists in this realm because it has been cast out from everything else within the dot of everything and has been brought down to earth. This is why it exists here, and it can only exist here. And it knows that it will inevitably die. Its goal is to divide and conquer. Its everywhere, and it's literally walking the earth looking for who to devour, as the Bible talks about. It's trying to get you to choose against that pattern that courses naturally through you. And it has created systems through powerful people over time, systems that can rob you of your own individuality, your own spirituality from cradle. Think about it. If you're trying to destroy someone, the best way to do it is at their weakest moment. And for most human beings, our weakest moments are when we are children, when we are so young and naive. This is why a lot of the systems that reek of so much malarkey have been created to indoctrinate you at a really young age. As a result, a lot of us grow up broken and misaligned, and then when we get older, we have children, we also corrupt our children with our brokenness and get them also misaligned. This is more common than you realize when you start to understand how truly serpentine this thing is. Again, it's not a literal snake. It's more so its nature. It's serpentine. It's cunning. It's very intelligent. It is ancient. And you come to realize how this thing works. Oh my God, it will blow your mind. Truly, what we're fighting is not flesh and blood. This is powers and principalities in higher places. This thing is dark and malevolent. It seeks to divide and conquer. However, when two or more are gathered in my name, I am there. This is the word of God in the Bible. What is the name of God? The name of God is love. When you love someone unconditionally, and by unconditionally, I'm talking about much deeper. A lot of things have been corrupted and perverted in this world, including that word love. But love, true love, has no polarity. It has no conditions whatsoever. This is a type of love that someone like Jesus came to show us the way. When you love someone as yourself, you come to understand that literally that good pattern that flows through you also flows through them, because in all you are one. You are part of one consciousness. In that type of love, you both speak the same language of God. The ego has no power over you when that happens, because the Spirit of God is within you and 1 + 1 is 1. However, the ego knows this, and this is why it works so hard to divide and conquer. And because of the ego's influence in the world, this is why we have all the mess that we have today. From the religious wars, tribalism, sexism, homophobia, patriarchy, misogyny, biphobia, transphobia, colorism, and all kinds of mess that don't even matter in the end. Again, these are all distractions and workings of the ego seeking to divide and conquer, because without the ego, we are one. Literally, we are the exact same consciousness. However, because you are a godly creature made in the image of God, in the ability to choose and the ability to create, now is all you've got to choose to be in alignment with that natural good pattern that courses through you, and then you create with it. Now is all you've got. Now is all there has ever been, all there is, and all there will ever be. And remember, you are good. No matter what, you are good. It would be impossible for you to not be good. It doesn't matter how you have been manifested. There is perfect, meticulous, precise order in the dot of everything that has brought you forth. There is no mistake in your creation. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you were born. You were born in Nigeria. You were born in America. You were born in South Africa. Born in Korea. Born in Nebraska. Born in Aba. Born in Ogun State. Born in Ghana. Born in some village in China. It doesn't matter if you're black or white. It doesn't matter if you're biracial, triracial. It doesn't matter if you're tall, short. It doesn't matter if you're dark skinned, light skinned, racially ambiguous. It doesn't matter if you're gay. It doesn't matter if you're straight, bisexual. It doesn't matter if you're Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba. It doesn't matter if you have a natural Nigerian accent. It doesn't matter if you have a natural American accent. It doesn't matter if you have a natural British accent. It doesn't matter the texture of your hair, 4C hair, kinky hair, straight hair, bald head. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the color of your eyes. It doesn't matter the color of your lips. It doesn't matter how much muscles you have or how much muscles you don't have. It doesn't matter what education you have. It doesn't matter if you went to an Ivy League school or not. It doesn't matter if you've been to America or not. It doesn't matter if your IQ is relatively high or low. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor, engineer, lawyer. It doesn't matter if you're a carpenter. It doesn't matter if you're a painter. It doesn't matter if you're a taxi driver. It doesn't matter if you're a security guard. None of that matters. Now is all there is for you to create. Choose to align with that which is within you. You are perfect. It naturally, perfectly courses through you. God, our good creator, the epitome of creation, has perfectly, meticulously created and formed you into existence. Embody that. God makes no mistakes. You are perfect the way you are. Anyone else, anything else, or anywhere else that tells you the complete opposite is a liar, and you need to run away from that. God's divine power has given us everything we need, and all of that is already within you, not without. God is within. Your portal to God, that consciousness, is within you. This is not something you find in some church or some mosque. It lives within you. So now is all you've got to heal and make peace with what is, because it is what it is. When you choose to align with that goodness, that good pattern that courses through your being, you are in heaven. Or with ego, when you choose to go against that natural pattern that courses through your being, you will die in hell. Now is all you've got. Uche, peace and love.